As we get started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and I want to learn about you guys and what you're facing specifically with conflicts and things. So we'll have a chance to kind of develop. But first, I guess first we're going to talk about just kind of the Zoom setting versus us together, because obviously this is a different sort of a thing. It sounds like a lot of you know each other, which is really good because in Zoom we can have the time where people just sit and don't pay attention, or not don't pay attention, don't speak. And so then it can be that dead time, which seems really awkward and everything. So as we get started, just a couple of requests that I have as we're doing this. Keep your videos on if possible. It just helps everybody to feel like they're in a room together. It makes things a little bit easier. Mute your mic unless you're talking because you get the dog in the background or, whatever, you're pouring a cup of coffee and everybody hears it and it gets weird and distracting and all that kind of thing. But definitely jump in and discuss stuff. So if you have a question, you could do the hand raise. I may or may not see it. I think Holly maybe is going to be watching the chat. Somebody's going to be watching the chat. So if you put in questions, let me know so I can see that. But feel free to jump in. So just unmute yourself and jump in at any time, as if we were just in a workshop in a room. Turn off your phone. It's We're in a world where it's so easy to, and I have mine sitting right here. I got to turn it over so it doesn't catch my attention. It's easy to get distracted by things. You are in jobs that require a lot of your attention. You've got a lot on your mind. You have things that you're going to have to do after this. Give yourself the permission to just kind of be here for the next hour and a half. Allow yourself to be present in this. And I guess I even have that. Be here, be present today. Not so much that out of respect for me or anybody else, but respect for yourself, so that you can really absorb what's here. You can hear what your colleagues are saying and that kind of a thing. So just kind of keep those things in mind to really just be here and be available. And to tell you a little bit about myself, Parker told you some of my background. I started out in with residential counseling is where I work. So kids that have been neglected and abused and taken out of the home. And so the conflict there is pretty constant, anywhere from not following directions to having to wrestle butcher knives away from kids. So it's just that whole kind of a thing. But for me, this whole relational conflict resolution idea developed out of that time. That was years and years ago. But what I noticed in myself over time, seeing how I did it wrong, is really what helped develop this. I started out, I'm a counselor by nature, by training, but that's just kind of who I am. And I defaulted to the feeling that everybody just needs to feel loved and then they'll be okay. So then I worked with kids early on in my internships and all that when they were going through conflict, I would just try and support them and be there for them. But I ended up crossing over and giving them too much and just getting taken advantage of. And I realized, okay, that doesn't work. They didn't get any help. I look like a fool. This doesn't work. So what I did was kind of jumped to the other extreme and sort of became the Gestapo, that nobody is going to take advantage of me. And I know what you're like, and you're doing this, so you need to follow the rules. And then all that did was shut the kids down. They followed rules. They did what they're supposed to out of fear, but it just shut them down. And what I came to over time was finding ways to build relationships with them. And in that, they would then work with me better and we could work through the conflicts. And so that's kind of the backdrop of where some of this came from. I also, oops, my wife and I founded a nonprofit several years back that we did for a while. We did counseling and we did it by donation. So I went through setting up the bylaws and the 501(c)(3) and all that kind of a thing. And so I have some the nonprofit experience. And then a few years later, I was executive director at another nonprofit. Both of them were very small. So those of you that it's just kind of a one person operation, I understand what that's like, trying to manage all of those things as you're dealing with fundraising and dealing with your clients and those kinds of things. So I have a feeling of the nonprofit world in that side of things. And then at this point, I supervise 13 people where I'm at. So then that brings its own set of conflict with it. So just to kind of give you an idea of who I am and where I'm coming from in that way. And then, like Parker mentioned, I have had a chance. I like to write along with speaking. I've had a chance to co-author a few books. So first, there's let's see. There's three of them. They're CEO ones, visionary CEO. Now this one I co-authored. So if you look really close, you'll see my name way down here in the corner. These three, and then the next one is the discipline CEO, and then the healthy CEO. These three are all set up so that all of the proceeds go to veterans for these three books. And then I also wrote a book myself. So since this was just me, my name's bigger on this one. So I have done some work in this area too, as far as the business side of things. What I want to do is I want to find out about you guys, but because we have, and I'm not sure how many are actually in here now, we had 25 or so set up. I want to do it in a breakout group, but what I really want to know is a little bit of who you are and where you're coming from. I know you're all from different nonprofits, different backgrounds in that sense. And it sounds like quite a few of you know each other. So these first couple questions might be very straightforward and simple, but the last one is really the one I want you to focus on. So just your name, your organization, your relationship to your clients. And what I mean by that is, do you do direct care with the clients, or do you supervise people that do that direct care? Because it's a little bit different depending on what kind of conflicts you might face. But most importantly, I want to talk about, are you facing any conflicts right now? And did you take this class because you just face conflicts in general, or is there something on your plate that you need to look at? Because some of those we could maybe even talk about as we go through this. So we're going to put you in a breakout groups for about 7 minutes. So it's not very long. Go through the first ones, but especially focus on if anybody's facing any conflict right now. And then I'll bring you back in here. And that's the part I want to hear about, kind of report back what your group came up with on what sort of conflicts you might be going through. I'd like to hear from the groups, what kind of things, especially if there's some conflicts that are going on right now. You don't have to give lots of details if you don't want to, but just so we can look at what people are facing right now. So who would like to go first?
I can go first for our group.
Okay.
I think as a combination of a couple of things of just volunteers feeling entitled and want to make the calls, and just some conflict with staff as well. And I think, am I forgetting anything, guys, from my team, Liz? Liz's conflict was mainly between staff members.
Okay.
Making it not a pleasant environment to work in.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Who else wants to share something?
Our group had talked about, a couple of us brought up volunteers breaking boundaries when in their work, and aging volunteers, how to have difficult conversations without bringing in a lot of conflict when someone isn't able to continue their role as a volunteer, and how that could be really difficult if they've been with the organization for so long. And then just like Lynn said, a lot of like dealing with strong personalities, whether it's on the staff or with the volunteer, either way, on how you can navigate that so everyone feels like they're having a positive experience.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do, that's good that we have some things to just kind of think about. And then there's the daily conflicts that come throughout anyway. Let me get back to, there we go. So what I want to do now, I'm going to go to another slide in a second that's going to have either a QR code on there you can use with your phone, or it has a link that you can go to your computer. And we're going to make a word wall or a word cloud. And what I want you to do is think about conflict and think about you're going in to deal with one of these. What do you feel inside? What thoughts do you have in your head? So we're not going to try and solve anything right now. We're just going to think about. And what I want you to know for today, what I'm going to do, we're going to get to a point where I give you some concrete steps on how to do things. But if I throw those out right now, they can sound just, I don't know, kind of trite, kind of hollow, that, yeah, do this. And even if you think that's a good idea, what's inside and what's coming behind that, the backdrop, is really what's going to make this more effective for you. So the first part, and probably even kind of a lot of what we're going to look at today, is more of a self-reflection and looking at mindset and how to change how we approach that, and then we'll look at those steps and apply them that way. So we are going to get to some real concrete things, but first we're going to look at some of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes in ourselves. So this slide here, what I want you to do, it's connecting. So you have the QR code, you can use your phone, or you can go to slido.com and then type in that code. And it's all anonymous. So just type in some words that come to mind when you think of conflict, and they'll pop up here and it'll make a little word cloud for us. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to work on that. And that will give us a picture of what happens inside of us when we feel conflict. And I should have told you to get phones out earlier for this. I didn't think of that, so I apologize about that. That made it a little bit quicker for you. Okay, we're getting a few on there. Frustration, uneasy, angst, sweaty, muddled. Yeah. Yeah, when we get overwhelmed, our mind, it's hard to think. Stressed, rushing heart, non-resolution. Stressed is getting bigger. Anxious. Ooh, anxious one. Exhausted, frustrated, self-doubt. Want to flee. Yeah. Okay. Self-doubt and frustrated are gaining some ground. Anger. Yeah. Okay. So that gives a feel of what's going on. Now, we're going to develop this more, but think about if you're walking into this situation, let's say somebody comes to your office and says, we have an angry client, volunteer, whatever, that you need to go talk to. This instantly pops up inside of us. And if I'm going into that situation, or if it's one where it's an employee and I have a meeting with them coming up at 11 o'clock, I'm spending the whole morning in this stuff. It starts to cloud my thinking. I like how somebody put muddled in there. It's hard to think. It's hard to come up with a plan because all of these feelings become overwhelming. And in that process, if we approach it from that side, that ends up kind of throwing some fuel on the fire, because I'm upset, I'm angry, I'm scared, I'm frustrated, and then I'm coming to this person who's the same way, and it's really hard to think. Somebody once said, if somebody is really angry and you're trying to talk with them, remember that you can't reason with a drunk. And if somebody's emotionally drunk, don't try and reason with them, because it's not going to work. You're trying to tell them things that are logical and they're emotionally off the chart. They can't hear you. You're just going to create a fight. So there's times when you just got to realize you can't reason with a drunk in that sense. So we've got this. Now let's just kind of cleanse your palate for a second and set that aside. Now we're going to look at, let's say these guys obviously aren't in conflict. They're enjoying each other. I want you to think about a time when, or if you can't think of a time when, just pretend that maybe you just met somebody new. You come to one of these networking events and you meet somebody and you say, and you click. You think, man, I could be their friend. It's the first day you've met, but you've got the same outlook on life. You see things that's similar, you have similar interests, and you think we need to get together sometime just to go have coffee. I really like you. And I think of my wife and we want to find a couple friend where she really likes the wife and I really like the husband. And if you can find that, that's awesome, instead of just one or the other. And so think of a time, or pretend that time is happening when you're in that situation. So now we're going to make another word cloud. And what I want you to do with this one is, what thoughts or feelings come to mind if you think of finding that new friend? So a whole different thought process here. What are you thinking? Warmth? Yeah. Possibilities? Excited, gratitude, comfort, emotional connection, pleasure, encouraging, future. Hopeful, reciprocating, relaxed, comfort, very different from the other wall. Yeah, hopeful's a big one. Happy, excited are big ones. Okay. This is a very different set of thoughts and feelings. What I want to do with you is help you move from that first word cloud to this word cloud as you're approaching conflict. Now, and I don't mean that you start with the first one, you go through, you work out the conflict, and then you feel this way. What I'm saying is before you ever walk into that situation to deal with the conflict, you switch from one word cloud to the other. And without even going any further, if you think about if I could walk into conflict feeling this way, you don't have muddled in here. You don't have confused in here. I'm going to be thinking a lot more clearly. I'm going to be calmer, hopeful that we're going to work through this. If you could make that change, I think you can see that you would have a lot better likelihood of positive results. Or even if they were negative results, you would come out of it less beaten up than you would have otherwise. And so we're gonna develop that more. What do you think of when you see this slide? Go ahead and just share some thoughts.
I feel like you're going into it not open-minded, or you go in with an open mind.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Have you has anybody read the book about the mindset, changing your mindset, the open mind versus closed mind? Shoot, I can't think of the name of the book. It's a good one. But anyway, just that concept of changing your mindset will change the way you approach things. And so that's what I want to look at for a minute. How can we change from one of those word clouds to the other one before that situation happens? These are on the bottom here are two videos. I'm not going to show them now, but I'm going to share this slide deck with Parker and he can send it out to you. I encourage you to watch these at some point. They're really, really good. I adjunct teach a Psych 101 class and also some college preparation classes and that. And I use these videos a lot. The first one talking about stress and how it actually can benefit us if we approach it a certain way and change your mindset, change the game. There's some incredible studies that she talks about in there. So these are in here just so you can watch them later. There's a principle that says when we go through hard times, when we face certain kind of trials, when life gets hard, whether it's conflict or our dogs have puppies. We didn't intend for them to have puppies. In fact, I had a surgery scheduled on December 26th for my female. And on the 25th, she went into heat. So they said, well, you really shouldn't do the surgery. So we went through the whole process of diapers and all that kind of thing. The boy hadn't been fixed yet either. Everything went great except one day. And then she got pregnant. And so now the puppies are 9 weeks old. Most of them are gone. I still have a couple left. So we've gone through, like feeding them every 3 hours and all that kind of thing. Because in the process, the mom ended up needing to have surgery because she got mastitis. And so then I had to take over feeding the puppies. So anyway, this has been a journey. And because of all my attention with them, we fall in love with each other. So then we cry every time somebody takes one and all that kind of thing. So anyway, it doesn't have to be conflict. There's any kind of hard time that you go through. So there's a principle that says going through those hard times leads to perseverance. And that's if we go through the hard time. If I avoid the hard time, either by, maybe substance abuse, by watching TV, by looking at YouTube videos and just kind of avoiding it, I'm not actually going through it. But if I face it and go through that hard time, it builds perseverance, which is a drag. Perseverance building is really hard. We don't like that, but it builds perseverance. And then that leads to character development. After a while, after that perseverance has time, it changes us. We grow. And that character development leads to hope. And then that hope never disappoints us. So there's a process that happens as we allow ourselves to go through these difficult times. And when conflict is there, we can want to avoid it. We can just try and, like I did with some of the kids early on, is just, well, let's just make them happy and then it'll be fine. And that's not going through it. If we actually allow ourselves to go through the difficult times, it does build us and it changes us. And the next time it's easier and it does give us hope. And that kind of a process happens. We're going to do another breakout group because I want you to discuss and then come back. And in this one, I want you to talk about a time that you or somebody you know went through a difficult time and came out the other side stronger, more at peace, a better person, whatever. Because knowing that that can happen gives us what we need to make the change from the first word cloud to the second word cloud. You can't, I can say, yes, do this, and you can agree, but it's a difficult process to do. Focusing on some of this and realizing that going through this difficult time is actually going to build me and make the next one easier and grow me more. That gives us the kind of the gumption, I guess, to be willing to make some of those changes. And so I hope that makes sense. So we're going to do a breakout group, and let's see, we'll do the two groups again. Why don't we say 10 minutes on this? Well, let me ask this first. Did you guys end up having a lot of downtime in the last one when we had 7 minutes? No? So you had time to talk and everything? Okay. Let me give you 10 minutes because I want you to have a chance to think about this, but also because you are a group together, you're a support group with each other, I think this kind of thing would be just helpful anyway for building your relationship. So we're going to do 10 minutes on this one. So take some time just to kind of talk about, maybe it was you, maybe it was somebody you know, where there's an example on how that really helped them and they came out the other side a better person because of that difficult time in their life. And then we'll go from there. So we'll go ahead and do the breakout groups again.
And we're back.
All right. How about a story or two? Does anybody have any examples from their group?
We talked a lot about switching jobs and the difficulty in making the decision to switch a job and then having to make that decision and roll with all of those changes while you're looking, and then the new job and jumping from the back and forth, really, from the attitudes from the one cloud to the other cloud.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's a good example. Anybody else have one? If not, that's okay.
Our group talked about when you want to let a volunteer go or close an auxiliary or whatever, you want the volunteer to feel good. So you stress the positives, but then you, at the same time, you feel good because you've made them feel good, but you let them go in a positive way.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's look a little bit more at mindset change. Now, this I'm even thinking as we're looking now and how much time we have left, this really probably could have been an afternoon workshop because there's a lot here. So, but this might require some mentoring or coaching. Working with somebody that you know there, or I do coaching with people, that kind of a thing, that depending on your background, depending on things that you've gone through, mindset change can be a really difficult kind of a thing to go through because things get really ingrained in us. So that's okay. And if what we're looking at sounds good, but you have a hard time with it, then you just might want to seek out somebody to kind of help you work through this process. So I just want to say that to say this can be a big endeavor that I'm kind of presenting and asking you to do. What I want you to do is choose what you're going to expect. Now, that can feel like a lie. I could say, we're gonna have a wedding and it's gonna be October 15th and it's gonna be outdoors. And in Michigan, that's really, odds are good it's gonna be really bad weather. But I could lie to myself and say, no, it's gonna be a great day, it's gonna be sunny, it's gonna be warm, everybody's gonna have fun. And so I can choose what I'm gonna expect in a way that's kind of ridiculous. But if there's a chance that something could be true, it's not necessarily a lie if I acknowledge it in that way. And what I want to do is kind of give you an example. When we look at how our beliefs determine our thoughts and they determine our actions. So we're going to look at that. And I'm going to use a completely different example than conflict, just so I can kind of show this and it'll help make sense, and then we'll apply it to conflict. So what we're going to look at is how we go down this dark path sometimes, and then that leads to a negative response, which we thought, well, that's exactly what I expected. And so, of course, it turned out this way. And I want to use an example of interviewing for a new job. Now, let's say there's a job that comes up and it just looks, you'd love this job. It's your dream job. But you have a bachelor's degree and they say bachelor's is okay, but master's is desired. They say they want 5 years experience in this. And you have probably 2 or maybe 3 if you kind of stretch it a little bit. They say that you need all these certain things and you kind of have them, but not really. And if you just look at me compared to all these other people that are going to look for this job because it's well paying, so a lot of people are going to want it, maybe I've got a 20% chance of getting this job. But that is a chance. And if it's something you want and you decide to go for it anyway, we're going to look at 2 different ways that you can do it, 2 different mindsets that you can take as you approach this interview that's coming up. So the first one is just kind of going down the dark path. Your belief is that I really don't have a very good chance of getting this job. I mean, it's not for me. I'd love it, but there's a lot of people are going to apply. I really doubt that I'm going to get this job. So then the thoughts that come with that are things like, all I really can do is hope for the best. I mean, I might as well throw my hat in there and see what happens. There's no sense putting too much effort into this because it's almost like buying a lotto ticket. I'll either win or I won't. So I'll put in my resume. If I get an interview, I'll go to the interview. But if all the stars align, I get the job, great, but I probably won't anyway. I'll either get it or I won't. There's not much I can do about it. So that's the thoughts that come from that belief. Now think about what kind of actions are going to come from this. How hard are you going to try? How much effort are you going to put into this? So the actions that flow from this, I've got very little preparation because why prepare? It's really just, like I said, it's a lotto ticket. You don't think really hard on which lotto ticket to buy. You buy the pretty one or whichever one you think might win. The night before the interview, you're going to watch TV just to get this off your mind because you're stressed about it. So you won't be preparing. You're just going to be kind of trying to pass time. And then you're going to wing the interview because you know that other people are there that have more experience. So I'm going to go in and hopefully I can present myself in a way that I'll get it, or maybe somebody there will like me and I might get the job. So that's kind of the thoughts, the beliefs and the thoughts and the actions flow in that direction. Now, let's look at the same thing, the same job, the same 20% chance that you might get it from looking at a different avenue of it, a mindset change, a different word cloud. So the belief is, it may be a long shot, but I could have a chance. And I think I really could do good in this position. I don't have the experience, I don't have the education, but I love this kind of thing. And I think I could do well if they give me a shot at this. So there's already a little bit of a difference in your belief system. It's the same chance that you'll get it if we could quantify that in some way, but you're choosing to believe a different beginning point. I know it's a long shot, but I have a chance. Everybody has a chance, and I think I could do okay. So the thoughts that come with that is, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to apply for this job, I need to totally invest because I'm competing with people that have a lot more experience in this. So I really need to invest in this. I need to spend extra time preparing. I have to work harder than the other candidates. So do you see the difference already in the last road? The last road was, I don't have much of a chance, so why even try? I'll just throw in a resume and see what happens. This is saying, I'd have a small chance. So if I'm going to do this, I need to really work at this. I need to spend more time than anybody else is going to do. The last thing I want to do is just wing it in the interview. So those are the thoughts. So now the actions that come from that, you seek out help in creating a cover letter and a resume. You don't just kind of throw something together. You look online, you watch YouTube videos, you go to a career counselor and get help in how do I set this up. You anticipate the interview questions and those objections that you say, man, it's not me, it's not good for me. Well, they're going to ask that kind of a question. Well, you've never done this sort of thing. Why do you think you can do this? Instead of that blowing you away, you would anticipate that question and you come up with some good answers to that question. And then you practice your interview. You go through, and if they say this, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to present myself this way. So you have a whole different path. Now, I think you can see this path, you're a lot more likely to get the job than you would have otherwise. But even if it's the same results, even if you don't get this position, think of how you'll feel about yourself following this path versus the other one. If you follow that first path and you get to the end and you don't get the job, you say, yeah, that was dumb. I shouldn't have even tried. And you're not going to try again next time, probably. That was just, it was above me. I just need to settle for what I have. If you go this way and you change your mindset and you're approaching it this way and you don't get the job, you can say, man, I think if I would tweak this, if I would do that, okay, they asked me this question. I wasn't ready for that. I need to prepare for that. I'm going to look for another one of these jobs. And the next time I'm going to be more ready. So even if it doesn't turn out good, you are less damaged by the process. You can come out more encouraged and say, next time I'm really going to go with this. Does that make sense? I can see a few faces, but I can't see everybody. So, okay. So that's part of changing the mindset before you ever walk into conflict. And this is how you can come out of those times by building perseverance and character and hope. This builds hope. You persevere, you really work hard to go through this process. You come to the end, even if it doesn't turn out the way you wanted, you have more hope for the future because look at how well I did. I got an interview. I think I had a pretty good chance at this. And yeah, this other guy who had the PhD in exactly what they're looking for got it. That's fine. And he was the guy's nephew. And all right, that happens. But next time, so you have some hope from this because you're working through it. Now, let's switch over to conflict. So why do people have conflict? Conflict ends up hitting us in the face and then we just deal with it. And we're kind of like just put out fires all the time. So we're thinking about why conflict comes. If somebody has a perceived lack of needs, it often leads to fear. I have this going on. It's my needs aren't being met and I get afraid. Now that might be an employee that is struggling with how much they're getting paid, or maybe they're having situations with another employee. And then let's think about what needs we actually have. As people, we have needs for food and water and that kind of a thing. But we also have needs for love, for affection, for appreciation, for value. Those are things that we need. And when we go without those, we have the same kind of hunger that you have if you go without food for too long. And the longer you go without food, the longer you go without water, you start fighting to get that. If I came up behind you and I plugged your nose and mouth, you wouldn't just sit there and say, well, 3 to 4 minutes, I'll probably pass out. And after 10 or 12 minutes, I'll be dead. That's okay. You'd start fighting. And if I was a lot stronger than you and I'm holding you, you're going to start fighting more and more and more. You're going to try and poke my eyes. You're going to kick me. You're going to do whatever you can. The longer you go without that need being met, the harder you're going to fight. If somebody's in a situation where their needs aren't being met, or they perceive that they're not being met, maybe because of their background, because of how they were raised, all those things, that leads to fear in them. And then fear often leads to anger. When if somebody's really angry, if you kind of can step back and look at the situation, they're probably got some fear underneath. I'm going to be hurt. I'm not being heard. This is going to happen to me and it's scary. And so I lash out. Look for that in situations at work or in your family. When somebody gets really angry about something, a lot of times there's fear. They might be embarrassed. And so my need for self-worth is being challenged here. So then I'm going to snap at somebody. So that tends to flow that way. And the problem is if we leave that anger unchecked and we kind of work with that, then that just breeds more anger. And that's a lot of times where conflict resolution comes in, is that if I'm in conflict with somebody and I approach them back in a hard kind of a way, then we just get in a fight and then we leave and everybody's hurt. But if you can kind of be able to step back and see what might be behind it, then that can help you work through some of this. So I'm going to just take a second, share some things of what you're thinking right now. What thoughts are you having about this?
Hi, John, this is Lisa here. So I'm thinking about the conflict I have with a more senior staff. And I totally agree, with everything you're saying, especially on this slide, really hits home. And so I'm always the one that wants to have those open conversations. And so how to, and I'm sure we're gonna get to this, but setting that safe space, that safe container, is fairly comfortable for me, but then other people aren't willing, if they're not going to
Mhm.
share their needs and their anger and frustration and fears, then where can we take this? So, as somebody who's very open to do this, but recognize that not everybody is. So I'm assuming that
Mhm.
we're going to chat about that. So, but that's what's stirring for me. So
Okay, good,
look forward to
thanks.
it.
Yeah, yeah, that's important. What else? What other kind of
think-
thoughts you guys having?
I think to bounce off of Lisa too, I would add another bullet to the end when it comes to something with like senior staff. Sometimes after you look at the anger and then more anger, it kind of goes to like, there's nothing I can do here. They're above me and I've said what I needed to say. So it's kind of like, for me, sometimes it goes to like just kind of giving up or trying to
Mhm.
redirect into something that I can control.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
bouncing off of her thought.
Good. Yeah, and those are good points. So as we're looking at the other, we'll look at that side too. Because I was thinking more of conflict where it's either peers or you as the supervisor or the volunteer director. But when it's somebody above you, it is a different sort of a thing. So I'm glad you brought that up. Any other thoughts? Okay.
I think when it comes then to like working with volunteers, then something that came to mind is that I think kind of going in with preparedness, but also like that open mindset from the slides that we just saw would help kind of like make that fear a little smaller at the beginning.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
was just thinking about a time where I had to redirect a volunteer into a different role. And I was so nervous about the conversation. I was so worried about how it was going to go that after I talked to the volunteer, they actually said, "Oh, good," because honestly, I've been really overwhelmed and I just needed
Mhm.
someone to give me an out. So
Mhm.
that's kind of something else that's been in my mind as you've been talking through this slide.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, what we're gonna, yeah, good. This will fit in very well. So what I'm looking at here is the other person's needs. So when you're dealing with a volunteer, somebody you're supervising or a coworker, and even a supervisor, this fits in. But when you're thinking about a supervisor, maybe we'll take kind of a little sidestep and think about your needs in here. So that can be a thing we'll talk about after this. But so if that perceived and it can be very perceived. That's the thing where that the emotional drunk idea, they come in and you want to say, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not the case at all. That doesn't help. If they're perceiving that their needs are being unmet and they're getting fearful and they're getting angry, we have to approach from that side. So there's three steps that I want to look at when we think of this person's needs, so how we can approach this. So this is kind of that recipe card formula thing that if I just gave you this, it could sound kind of trite, but if it's in line with all this other stuff, it can be a lot more meaningful. First one is discover their need. Not easy to do. It's usually not their stated need, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. So first we discover their need. Then we want to speak to that need. And then we're going to find a way to meet that need. So those are the three steps. I'm going to break them down. We're going to look at them a little bit more in depth. But if you're coming to me and there's this perceived need and you're angry and there's conflict and all that stuff, or it's between two employees, if I can discover what the real need is here and then speak to that need and then find a way to meet that need. And if I'm coming in from the side of, I'm going to assume that there's at least a chance this could work out where we could all be friends in the long run. I could even this person I'm in conflict with, I could develop a new friendship with this person. That's possible. It may not happen, but that's possible. Then I'm going to try harder. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to look for avenues and I'm going to put more effort into it as opposed to coming in thinking, oh, great, there's another conflict. I'm going to have to go deal with it. It's probably going to turn out bad. I'm going to walk in and just wing it and, expect it to go to pot. That's that mindset change. So now let's look at these individually. So discovering their need. It's probably not the stated need. I'm really upset because there's probably something underneath that. And that's where it takes a little bit of creativity as you're talking with them, as you're working through this, or maybe you already know this person. Does this person tend to feel like they are not listened to? They're blown off all the time. And that need of importance might be what really is there, or value, but they're coming out saying, it's not right because anytime I go into the room, there's no coffee made, and this is just stupid. It's got to change. Okay, it's probably not about coffee. It's probably about something else. So if I can try and figure out what that need is and realize if I'm only looking at the stated need, now, not that I ignore that, because, that's real. It's concrete. It's what they're holding on to. But start thinking about what might be behind that. Those needs that we have for love, for value, for affection, for worth, those kinds of needs. Which one of those are they really missing right now? It might just be they need to be heard. If people aren't heard nowadays, so much more with technology and everything. It's real quick answers. It's a quick email. It's me texting on my phone while you're talking to me. People need to be heard, which is a valuable thing. It might just mean that. Agree whenever you can. And what I mean by this, and this, I heard this technique years ago, and this was when I was working with the youth and with their parents who would come in. We worked a lot with the parents of the kids. If somebody comes in and they're really angry, if I get defensive and want to defend myself, want to correct them, that's just going to escalate. There's probably a point where you're coming in and saying, this is ridiculous. I can't believe this is going on. I probably could agree with you. And if I say, man, I hear you. This is ridiculous. Even if you're yelling at me about something I do. Oh man, that's terrible. I can see why you'd feel that way. What that tends to do is if you're coming at me and I come back at you with that, you're feeling a little bit heard. You're assuming I'm going to try and fight you. When I don't, it disarms you a bit. What people tend to do, and if you do this, you'll find this, they'll often back down and say, no, it's really not that bad. But if I tell you it's not that bad, that's going to make you mad. But if I say, wow, that's terrible, I can see why you'd feel that way. I'd be really mad too. They just kind of like, oh, well, I'll get over it. It's really not that big of a deal. And that itself can disarm the situation. So find ways to agree with them. Think of it this way. If you and I are sitting across from each other at a table trying to debate something, if I come over and sit next to you and we're now both looking the same way, I'm no longer your problem. The problem is over there. I'm sitting next to you and we're looking at that problem together so I can help solve this problem. So you want to get out of the seat where you're the problem to them and align with them and sit next to them. So this kind of a thing can do that. Agree wherever you can. Now, you don't have to sell yourself out. You don't have to say, yeah, I'm a miserable person. I shouldn't have done that. That's not it. But there's probably something you can agree with. I don't like this situation either. This is really frustrating for all of us, that sort of a thing. People don't feel heard. It's so powerful if you can actually hear somebody. Because they're saying, I'm really mad about this. And if I say, it sounds like, or if this was me, I'd be really hurt because this person did this to me. Yeah, I am. If they can feel heard, that's just so powerful. And that this itself can diffuse that situation. So that's where we want to consider our basic human needs. Like I said, just like we have needs for food, water, and air, we have needs for love, affirmation, affection, value, worth, significance, those kinds of things. Those are the needs that get us going, not somebody cut me off. Well, they cut me off and that's making me afraid because I don't want to get in an accident. It's making me late because of traffic. I'm not mad at traffic. I'm mad that I'm going to be late and embarrassed that I didn't leave early enough. And, that kind of a thing. If you get called out in a meeting, you feel ashamed or embarrassed or your pride is hurt. So then you snap at somebody else. Well, what they did really isn't the point. It's the fact that I'm feeling this way. So it's considering those basic human needs. So then speak to that need. And this is part of letting them know that you're hearing them. It sounds like you're feeling this, or tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you're saying that you really wish your coworker would have done this for you, that kind of a thing. So you're speaking to that need. You're letting them know that you hear the need. Or even just speaking in a way of saying, it's really frustrating when this happens to people. So you're kind of putting words out there that they're not able to say, and then they can say, yes, that is what it is. Don't say, I know exactly how you feel, because you don't. But you can, these kind of things that this is really frustrating when that happens to me, and they can say, yes, that's how I feel. So it's that kind of a thing. Sometimes you have to put some words out there that they can grab onto. If they're just complaining, that's where you can say, that's terrible. That must be frustrating. And just let them talk until they kind of get that emotion out. Sometimes that can take a while. You let them talk and say, wow, that's frustrating. That's terrible. I can't believe you had to go through that. And after a while, they'll kind of exhaust themselves. And then that's when they can, that's when they get off of the drunk part. And then they just, you can tell when somebody surrenders a little bit. And then that's when they're able to hear. And we can move on to, okay, how can we work through this? But if I'm trying to work through it while you're super angry and super into these emotions, all I'm going to do is fuel the flame. And then meet the need. So we discover the need, we speak to that need. Now we're going to meet the need. Now, it doesn't mean you have to give in to whatever they want, but it might. It might be that, you know what, we were wrong. I'm really sorry for that. We're going to do this to make it right. So sometimes it does just mean admitting I was wrong. I should not have done that. I'm sorry I did that. Let me do this for you. But it doesn't mean that if there's some people that are just going to keep complaining and they just want whatever they want, and we don't have to bow down to that and meet all their needs. But we can find ways to, you're kind to them, but you don't have to compromise your values. But be creative in this process. See if you can figure out, again, not necessarily the stated problem, if I can find out what their real need is, and if I can meet that need by letting them feel heard, by letting them know how valuable they really are. You're approaching a volunteer that you want to move to another position, they might feel hurt, their pride is hurt, but if you can come in and realize that's what's going on, and I can uplift them and tell them how valuable you are here, and you've been valuable there, and I really think you're going to do so much more good over here. Okay, I'm meeting the need, and now the job change isn't the problem. I'm meeting that need for them. And no matter how it turns out, be kind to yourself. You've come through and you've put a lot of effort into this. And even if they leave mad, in the long run, that's okay. It's kind of like taking that brighter path. Even if you don't get the job, you can say, but I did this and this, and I've learned from this, and next time it'll be better. And I hate it when somebody's mad at me, if they leave a situation and they're angry. But if I've done what I can, it's a little bit easier to say, but that's on them. It's not on me. I'm sorry that they're mad, but I can be okay with that. Now, when it's a supervisor, there's a couple of different things we can do. You can take this and look at what is my need and why is this conflict hurting me so much, and do whatever you can to meet your need. And it might mean looking to other people to get love and affirmation and affection. It might mean coming to a point where, this person's kind of a jerk, and I can find satisfaction in other ways, and that's okay. It might mean I was in a situation where I ended up documenting things and turning it into HR and saying, this is what's going on here. And I waited too long because HR said, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And the vice president said, you can work under me instead of under her. But by then I was so mad and so done with this person, I said, no, I'm just leaving, and I wish I would have done that sooner. I could have taken some more proactive steps. But I've also left positions because the supervisor that I work for just, I don't, it's not worth it. I don't want to work for you. I'm worth more than that. So I'm going to look for a different job and just leave, so there is that possibility too. If there's constant conflict and I've done what I can, maybe the best way to be kind to myself is just to say, I don't have to be in this situation. You're kind of a toxic person, and I'm going to find my exit ramp. And it might take 6 months to build that exit ramp, but it helps me feel better that I know I'm building an exit ramp to get away from this person, so it can kind of tolerate the yuck in the meantime. So that's a possibility too. But if you take that and apply these things to yourself, when it's somebody that's over you that you really don't have any control over whether they change or don't change, that could help in that situation. And, all of this is difficult. Any kind of conflict is a difficult thing. But that's why I really wanted to focus on that inside change. So you can be working on as much as you can be working on. And then how do I want to end my slideshow so that we can, any thoughts or questions that you have right now? Yeah.
Just a request to drop your email in the chat.
Okay. I have it on the slideshow, but that's a great idea. I will do it here.
I thought this was so good because so many times I go into things and only think of like the worst scenario, like what the worst thing that can happen. And I always thought maybe that's the best way to go into it, because then when it's not bad,
I know. I used to
maybe
do
it's
that.
better going into it thinking
Yeah.
the best, or at least
I won't be
little bit
disappointed
more.
because I expected the worst. It was like, no, that was a miserable way to live. That was my motto. I remember thinking that.
Yes. I'm always like, what happened? That's going to be awful. And then,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Any
think,
other thoughts? Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, that's okay. I think you touched on it, like looking at what the underlying need is, right? And not just the one that is right there in front of you. Depending on how much you know the person and how much background you have with them and how much experience you have with them. I mean, I think it's important to walk into it with just a curious mindset and ask questions and I liked your point about agreeing with them when you can to help kind of diffuse things and because it can help diffuse it on their end, like you said, right? They'll do that. But that curious mindset I felt, and it's taken some time to learn that and not to be defensive initially, but just because what kind of sometimes happens for me is I develop a more compassionate mindset toward them, or whatever that they're dealing with or whatever's causing this reaction, and that helps in that interaction, right?
Yes, definitely. That's a great point.
I had a question actually.
Mhm.
You know, when you're first approaching that person that you have a conflict with, a perceived conflict, like, and you want to set up a safe space for conversation, what are some good, like, first statements to kind of get the ball rolling?
One thing I think is, it's not necessarily a statement, but it's kind of a thought process, is it's okay to be honest about this situation. I mean, we all know what's going on. We all know you two are fighting with each other. We all know that you're really mad at me about something. And or maybe it's just me, but I tend to want to come in from kind of the side door and not stir things up. But you might as well just be honest that, listen, I know we got some stuff going on. I want to sit down and work through it with you. What would work for you? Would you rather, is first thing in the morning a good thing, or is right at the end of the workday a good thing? What would be best for you so that we can work on this? So just approaching it very straightforward and honestly, because everybody involved knows, and probably everybody else knows too. So just being right up front, I think, is a good way to do that, to set up that initial sit down.
John, I just
Right.
wanted to say thank you. I learned a lot, and I'm very excited to go into the next conflict, which I know is going to happen, with a different mindset. So I'm
Cool.
excited. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you to John for an amazing program.
Thank
thanks
you.
for
Yeah,
having
thank
me.
you, John.
thank you.
Bye-bye now.
See
Bye,
ya.
guys. Thank you.